Dreaming of a local ski hill with world-class terrain? Bridger Bowl might be the hidden gem you've been looking for. With less than 2,000 skiable acres and no-frills infrastructure, this Montana resort may not seem like a world killer on the surface. However, Bridger Bowl's terrain makes for one of the most memorable experiences one can have at a ski resort, provided one is proficient enough to handle it. So just how proficient do you have to be? Well, in this video, we'll go through Bridger Bowl's overall mountain experience, and then we'll go through how the resort stacks up in our overall rankings. Before we get started, you can actually join us at Bridger Bowl just a few weeks from now. More on that at the end of the video. Let's jump right into it. With 1,640 skiable acres, Bridger Bowl is generously sized for a local ski hill, although it is quite a bit smaller than most destination ski resorts. The resort starts out with one base area and widens out as it gets higher in elevation. Bridger Bowl also gets progressively steeper as guests proceed up the mountain, with the lower mountain almost exclusively serving beginner terrain, mid-mountain areas specializing in intermediate and advanced trails, and upper mountain areas home to an abundance of steep chutes and cliffs. In fact, several of Bridger Bowl's upper mountain areas are so perilous that the resort requires an avalanche beacon to even access them. Bridger Bowl is essentially the town hill for Bozeman, Montana, and luckily for those learning, it offers a reasonably strong experience for beginners. The lower mountain Virginia City and Sunnyside chairs almost exclusively serve easier green runs, while the mid-mountain Alpine lift offers a handful of green trails as well, with the upper part of this terrain zone hosting some unique open glade areas for this ability level. Although all guests coming from mid and upper mountain areas need to funnel through the beginner zones to get back to the base, there's a wide enough variety of trails that no one run ends up attracting all the traffic. For skiers and riders who are just learning, the Snowflake Triple Chair and a handful of magic carpets provide access to a small bunny hill near the base of the ski area. Bridger Bowl has some solid intermediate terrain as well. The Alpine, Powdered Park, and Pierre's Knob lifts serve Groom's Blue rated cruisers, while the Alpine lift offers access to some nice mellower glade terrain as well. The mid station of the Bridger lift also serves some blues, but this area is mainly used for race training. Bridger Bowl isn't exactly a destination for park rats, but it does have two terrain parks in its lower mountain that will keep freestyle enthusiasts reasonably satisfied. Features range in size from small to large and include boxes, rails, jumps, and jibs. For single black level trails, the Bridger lift is the place to be. Past the mid station, this lift does not offer any intermediate or lower ways down. This chair serves a series of advanced level bowls and chutes that mogul up quickly, making for some particularly demanding runs. The Pierre's Knob and Powder Park lifts serve some shorter advanced level trails as well, and these runs can be nice for trying out mogul terrain for the first time. But while Bridger Bowl does have a good variety of terrain for all ability levels, the resort's expert terrain is where it really starts becoming worth it to travel out of the way for. What we'd call the lower tier of Bridger's expert runs are marked with a double black diamond symbol. These chutes mainly exist off the Bridger lift via the high traverse, and they involve particularly steep, high consequence fall lines with very little room for error. Some of these chutes are lined by rocks, making for dramatic backdrops. But where you really want to be at Bridger Bowl if you are a confident expert is on its ridge terrain. Denoted with a purple shade on the trail map, these terrain zones have no official trails, are fair game for all sorts of unmarked obstacles such as cliffs and chutes, and involve such highly exposed terrain that an avalanche beacon is required to access it. It's worth noting that the name ridge terrain is a bit misleading. In addition to the primarily hike-only ridge itself, this zone also encompasses the Schlasman's area, a fully lift-served freeride zone at the far skier's right of the resort. Since Schlasman's is fully part of this restricted area, guests will need a working avalanche transceiver to ride it, making it, as far as we know, the only lift in the United States to have such a requirement. But there's good reason for this. Schlasman's provides access to what might be one of, if not the most, unhinged lift-served skiable footprints in the world. There's genuinely crazy terrain off Schlasman's, with no warning markings within the area, mandatory straight lining or cliffs depending on where you end up, and very little guidance on how to avoid or find these obstacles if you don't know what you're doing. There are several routes that we'd call regular expert level down Schlasman's that don't involve this level of extreme caliber terrain, but if you aren't familiar with the area, it's best to find an in-the-know guide or partner to avoid any unwanted hazards. But if you're looking for a level of extreme terrain that's even more bonkers than Schlasman's, a hike up the ridge itself may be the way to go. The Bridgerable ridge hikes aren't the longest in the world, but they are quite steep, especially as you get further away from Schlasman's, so you want to make sure you're in good cardio shape to do them. But once you get to the top of these hikes, you'll realize that cardio shape is the least of your concerns, especially if you choose the one from the top of the Bridger lift to the C and D routes. You will be facing terrain where you are highly likely to get cliffed out if you don't know where you're going, and you'll need to handle extremely steep, narrow, and tight chutes at a bare minimum to get down. Several seemingly okay looking routes involve mandatory cliffs once you make your way down, some of which are paired with mandatory straight linings before or after depending on the snowpack. Ski Patrol will not quote-unquote close any runs if the hike is open, so it's up to you to use your best judgment on which lines are sendable. If you are not supremely confident in being able to make tough turns in any situation, the ridge hike may not be for you. For both Schlasman's and the ridge, Bridgerable does have a photograph-based guide to the terrain with unofficial route names, but this is by no means a substitute for experience in this area, and if you do not have such experience, you are, as we mentioned, best off finding an experienced partner or hiring a guide. One interesting quirk worth mentioning about Bridgerable: as you are hiking up the ridge from the top of the Bridger lift, you'll notice a surface lift neighboring the hike path. But while it might look enticing, this lift is reserved for Ski Patrol only, so if you're a regular guest at the mountain, you'll just have to watch patrollers pass you by as you earn your turns the old-fashioned way. Bridgerable may be a world killer when it comes to extreme terrain, but the same isn't necessarily true when it comes to resort infrastructure. Now, everything at Bridger is well maintained and in good working order, but all of the resort's lifts are slow, with Schlasman's being a double, sunny-sided quad, and the rest being triple chairs. Bridgerable also has a number of convenient places to stop in for a break, although as with the lifts, they're more functional than fancy. The Deer Park Chalet and Alpine Cabin offer grab-and-go cafeteria food close to the bases of the mid-mountain lifts, although the Alpine Cabin can be a bit tough to find depending on where you come from on the mountain. Food at the lodges is pretty average, but it's more reasonably priced than what you'd typically find at a destination ski resort, especially at the base lodge. Bridgerable also lags slightly behind some of its destination competitors in terms of snow totals, although its accumulation numbers are generally still quite respectable overall. With annual snow totals that typically range between 200 to 300 inches per season, the resort generally enjoys a reliable snow base, although some mid and lower mountain areas experience thin cover during low seasons. Bridgerable has a lower summit elevation than most US Rockies destinations, topping out at just 8,800 feet, and combined with its primarily east-facing terrain, the resort is prone to sunbake if it's clear out with no snow in the past few days. If natural snow doesn't come, snowmaking operations are extremely limited, with the man-made snow capabilities that do exist concentrated in lower mountain areas. Luckily, strong grooming operations keep Bridgerbow's beginner, intermediate, and even a handful of advanced runs in a baseline level of good shape throughout the winter season. When you get to Bridgerbowl, it looks pretty unassuming due to its small base area and mellower lower mountain terrain. But thanks in large part to its lack of buildup and distinctive ridge, one will appreciate the Bridgerbowl feel more the higher one gets. The resort isn't exactly big enough to feel truly isolating. You'll be looking down onto the more family-friendly slopes from even the most remote ridge areas, but its combination of a local feel and jagged terrain is really hard to come by at the better-known destination resorts. But despite its modest size, Bridgerbowl does have a few issues when it comes to getting around. On top of the almost complete lack of signage in the ridge terrain areas that's not exactly an accident, getting to and from the Schlasman's area isn't exactly easy either. Once you go through the access gate near the top of the Pierre's lift, it's easy to miss the turn to get to Schlasman's and accidentally end up at Pierre's instead if you're not staying to the skiers right past this gate. Leaving Schlasman's isn't exactly the most fun experience either, with some flat terrain required to get back to the other resort areas. However, when navigating the more family-friendly resort areas, things are a lot more straightforward. One nice touch is the Deer Park Magic Carpet from the base of the Pierre's knob lift to the base of the Bridger lift, which allows guests to get to both the Bridger lift and the Deer Park Chalet without a lengthy sidestep or a run all the way down to the bottom of the resort. One might argue that a big contributor to Bridgerbowl's locally focused clientele is the resort's total absence from all multi-resort pass products, including Epic, Icon, and even the Indy Pass. However, the resort can still get quite busy on weekends and holidays, especially at the beginner and intermediate focus lifts, with Bozeman locals making their way to the mountain for some conveniently located turns. As a result, Those hoping to visit Bridger Bowl to get away from the crowds during a peak time may be a little bit disappointed. But Bridger Bowl's status as Bozeman's town hill does have a couple of benefits. The resort is located quite conveniently for those traveling by way of Bozeman, being about a half-hour drive from the Bozeman-Yellowstone International Airport, with most practical lodging options significantly closer to the resort than there. As a state-owned ski area rather than a true resort, Bridger Bowl lacks on-site lodging. However, there are plenty of options in and around Bozeman proper. Accommodations range from the dirt cheap but social Shared Room Treasure State Hostel to the high-end Kimpton 5-star hotel, with a range of hotel, Airbnb, and vacation home rental options in between. Bridger Bowl itself is about the skiing and riding rather than the party scene, and the resort is pretty low-key after the slopes close. However, a bar and grill in the Jim Bridger Base Lodge has enjoyable happy hour vibes, and offers a good chance to connect with some of the locals and inhabit some of their mind space. Less than half an hour away from the resort, Bozeman offers many more options for après, including a huge variety of bars and restaurants. Bozeman is a college town, so you can expect at least some sort of scene every night. So Bridger Bowl is a family-friendly local ski hill for those in the Bozeman area that also happens to have some of the best inbound extreme skiing and riding in the world. If beginner through advanced slopes are your thing, Bridger Bowl won't really offer enough to beat out true fly-to ski destinations such as Big Sky and Jackson Hole, but if you're looking for the hardest inbound ski terrain that North America can offer, the resort puts up one heck of a fight for that title. One of the best parts about Bridger Bowl is that despite its world-class extremes, its locally run, non-profit roots extend over to its pricing. One-day adult rates top out at just $97 if you buy at the window, and top out at just $82 if you buy online. Even with a $10 reloadable card charge, this is quite reasonable by today's standards for any 1,600-acre ski resort, let alone one that offers some of the most insane skiable terrain on the continent. If you've missed the Epic and Icon Pass deadline, this pricing structure can make Bridger a nice bargain alternative to the destinations. Now let's go through how Bridger Bowl stacks up in our overall rankings, which are determined by the following 10 category mountain score. Bridger Bowl sees the strong snow totals typical of a Rockies ski resort, although accumulation isn't as plentiful as the best big mountain ski resorts, and the mountain gets an 8 for snow. Bridger Bowl's northern location helps keep things reasonably consistent a lot of the time, but a modest elevation, extremely limited snowmaking, and east-facing footprint hurt operations when it's a bad season, getting the resort a 6 for resiliency. Bridger Bowl claims a 2,000-acre footprint, but based on our measurements, only 1,640 of these acres are actually within the skiable boundary, and the resort gets a 6 for size. Bridger Bowl offers a range of terrain for all abilities, although beginner to advanced runs don't stand out all that much versus bigger destinations, and the resort gets a 6 for terrain diversity. Bridger Bowl's expert footprint is world-class, with its Schlasmans and ridge terrain zones offering some of the most dangerous skiable terrain one can find anywhere, even right off the lifts in some cases. The resort earns our highest score of 10 for challenge. Bridger Bowl's lift fleet isn't going to collapse anytime soon, but all chairlifts are slow. 17% of terrain requires hiking to reach, and the resort gets a 3 for lifts. Bridger Bowl doesn't attract too many out-of-towners, but despite a few helpful redundancies, lift lines can still be somewhat of a problem on peak dates and powder days, although the limited parking does create a cap on how bad these crowds can be, and the resort gets a 7 for crowd flow. Bridger Bowl's on-mountain lodges aren't fancy, but they're practically placed for the most part, and the resort gets a 7 for facilities. Bridger Bowl's lower and mid-mountain areas are generally easy to get around, but getting to and from Schlasman's can be a pain, and the resort gets a 6 for navigation. And finally, mountain aesthetic. Bridger Bowl isn't the biggest or most remote ski resort out there, but its ridge is quite the iconic beast, and no one is going to mistake this resort for a heavily commercialized mega mountain, and the resort gets a 7 in this category. These categories add up to an overall score of 66, placing Bridger Bowl 7th in the Northern Rockies and 46th in North America as of early 2025. Bridger Bowl is no substitute for a true destination resort, but if you are looking for the most unhinged terrain you can find, and you are willing to work to get to it, it might be one of the most memorable resorts you'll ever hit. So does Bridger Bowl sound like it's your kind of mountain? We're incredibly excited to share that we've got you covered. Join our team and other like-minded enthusiasts on our Northern Rockies road trip, where we'll be taking on Bridger Bowl as well as nearby Big Sky and Jackson Hole on the week-long adventure of your dreams. And because we want this to be the best ski week you've ever been on, this isn't just some ordinary ski trip. We've rented out 2 lodges, coordinated all airport and road trip transportation, and arranged to have meals, snacks, and operate in-house throughout the entire trip. And if you're not feeling up to the task of Bridger, no problem. We have a few spots left for our Colorado, Italy, and Mammoth trips too. Only limited spots remain, so if you want to sign up and experience the Northern Rockies or any of these regions in all of their glory, click the link in the description below. If you found this information helpful, be sure to like and subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss any of our content. And special thanks to our Peak patrons. For more information on Bridger Bowl and over 100 ski resorts around the world, check out peakrankings.com. See you for the next one.